We have some bombshell news here. A federal judge has just blocked Trump's effort to unilaterally freeze aid, issuing a temporary stay while the litigation plays out. That is a welcome sign of relief after Trump and his Office of Management and Budget announced a pause on all federal assistance. The immediate consequence of that decision is that Medicaid funding, among a raft of other programs, has been frozen. Senator Wyden took to Twitter and wrote, "My staff has confirmed reports that Medicaid portals are down in all 50 states following last night's federal funding freeze. This is a blatant attempt to rip away health insurance from a million Americans overnight and will get people killed." Those claims have been verified by other senators. Chris Murphy, for example, wrote, "In Connecticut, the Head Start reimbursement system is shut down. Preschools cannot pay staff and will need to start laying off staff very soon and sending little kids home." Maxwell Alejandro Frost wrote, "We've been on the phone with multiple agencies and organizations. They've been completely cut off from federal money. We're talking about housing, homeless services, public safety, etc. Just confirmed that the Trump administration shut down the Medicaid portal for Florida. There are over 3.8 million Floridians on Medicaid." So that we're clear about who's impacted here, according to Medicaid.gov, nearly 80 million people in the U.S. were enrolled in Medicaid and the Children's Health Insurance Program, CHIP, in October 2024. Of those enrolled in either program, more than 37 million were children. Donald Trump decided to punish 80 million Americans, including 37 million children, all of whom are sick, because healthcare was apparently not important enough to Donald Trump and those 13 billionaires in his cabinet. Notice too, it was Medicaid that was blocked, not Medicare. Why? Because Medicare services a more reliable voting bloc than Medicaid. Medicaid recipients are low-income folks and also children. They don't vote at the same levels that seniors vote, meaning that there was a political calculation here wherein the Trump administration was willing to cut healthcare for poor people because they don't exercise their political power to the same degree as seniors, who they spared because they do exercise their political power. In other words, they deigned to allow seniors to keep their healthcare because they didn't want to suffer any political consequences, but they were perfectly content to strip healthcare away from poor people because the political consequences wouldn't be that severe. For anybody who thought that they were voting for lower egg prices, that was the window dressing. This is what the Trump administration looks like in practice. In fact, even veterans groups are being impacted. According to Jeff Stein from the Washington Post, just got off the phone with a Northern California nonprofit. They provide emergency funds to help homeless veterans, particularly immediate money to get them into hotels and shelters. They are close to 100% funded by federal grants. Officials warned homeless veterans will get hurt if their grants are frozen, which they think appears likely under the OMB order. Just in case you were still under the assumption that Republicans are the party of the military or in any way cared about our veterans. Now, recognizing the backlash here, the OMB tried to clarify its position, issuing a memo writing, "Any program that provided direct benefits to Americans is explicitly excluded from the pause and exempted from this review process. In addition to Social Security and Medicare, they've already explicitly excluded in the guidance mandatory programs like Medicaid and SNAP will continue without pause." Now, two problems here. The first is that by being forced to issue this clarification, that is a tacit admission that the initial guidance did in fact freeze aid to these programs. But the second problem is that there are also programs that directly benefit Americans where the funding still goes to a program first, like for example, Meals on Wheels. Here's the CEO and president of that program.
A lot of people don't realize that Meals on Wheels, 37% of that funding comes through the Older Americans Act, specifically the Older Americans Act Nutrition Program. And that is on the list as a grant-funded program, which it is, because the actual support for Meals on Wheels goes from the federal government to the states, down through eventually to Meals on Wheels providers who provide those meals to seniors in need. So it is not directly provided to the senior. The funding is not going directly to the individual, which is what I think the memo said, that programs would be exempt if the funding is going directly to an individual, like Medicare, Social Security. Right. But in the case of Meals on Wheels, I think there's just a lack of understanding of where the funding comes from.
Now, one might think that when you get caught trying to strip healthcare funding away from Americans that had already been allocated by Congress, you might show at least some contrition. That's, of course, not what Trump's team decided to do. His press secretary, Carolyn Leavitt, instead expressed uncertainty as to what even was going on.
It wasn't clear to me whether you were saying that no Medicaid would be cut off. Obviously, a lot of this goes to states before it goes to individuals. and so forth. So are you guaranteeing here that no individual now on Medicaid would see a cutoff because of the policy?
I'll check back on that and get back to you. John.
And in fact, she looked like Mother Teresa compared to other Republicans who were outright cheering on the move. Here's Republican Congressman Rich McCormick applauding the elimination of free lunches for low-income kids.
I mean, how many people got their start in fast food restaurants when they were kids versus just giving a blanket rule that gives all kids lunches in high school who are capable of going out and actually getting a job and doing something that makes them have value, thinking about their future instead of thinking about how they're going to sponge off the government when they don't need to. We don't give people value. We don't give them the ability to dig themselves out when we penalize them for actually working and actually keep them on welfare. That's what's been the inner city problem for a very long time. We need to have a top-down review so we can get people out of poverty, because you know what? America's very good at creating jobs and giving people worth. And we've been very traditionally good at that, but we're losing our way. And that's when we give people incentives to stay at home and not work. That doesn't work for America.
But a lot of these kids aren't even of like working age. They're young kids, and as you well know, and also some of the kids at Head Start, they're like 5 and under.
Yeah, stop sponging off the government. Go make something of yourself. Who cares if you're 8 years old? It's never too early to learn how to work and stop being such a government mooch. What we're learning right now is that Republicans are not in power to help the most vulnerable in this country. That is not their priority. They are there to help the least vulnerable. They are there to serve as a boon for the wealthiest Americans. There are 13 billionaires in Trump's cabinet alone. The shadow president is literally the richest man on the planet. The fact that it took the Trump White House all of a week to strip healthcare funding away from the neediest Americans is a testament to exactly that. Another priority? Consolidating power in the executive branch. And Donald Trump is relying on Project 2025 author and current OMB director nominee Russ VA to do exactly that. To be clear, Vought is in favor of Donald Trump being able to consolidate power into the executive branch like he is doing right now. He is in favor of rendering the legislative branch and the judicial branch moot and inferior and giving Donald Trump full authority on how the government functions, including how money gets allocated and who gets paid, expressly so that he can create a system where the only people who derive any benefit from the government are the people who have positioned themselves as allies to Donald Trump. I spoke with the ranking member of the House Budget Committee today about Russ Vought, and here's what he had to say.
What he wants to do, and what Russ Vought, who most Americans have never heard of Russ Vought, he's an incredibly important, dangerous figure for someone that most people have never heard of. He was the former OMB director. He will likely be the next OMB director. He is one of the principal authors of Trump's Project 2025. He has actually put pen to paper and laid out this entirely authoritarian vision of a presidency that renders Congress moot, that is completely unchecked by the courts. This is frankly more of what I expect. A presidency that has more power than at any point in American history, that completely upends the normal constitutional system of checks and balances. And I think, frankly, those of us serving in Congress, but again, we as the American people need to continue to speak out and be active, because I think the next several weeks and months and years are going to be more and more extreme unconstitutional actions like the one that we've seen in the last 24 hours.
This is what autocracy looks like. Government by fiat, with one supreme ruler in charge of everything. That is the system of government that Donald Trump is trying to usher in, and one that Donald Trump's pending OMB director, Russ Vought, would help him enable. Mark Elias very clearly illustrated the form of government here in response to Trump's decision to fire career civil servants, which, as you know, is another major element of Russ Vaught's Project 2025. Can you explain briefly why this matters? Like, if people are watching this and saying, well, who cares if it's political appointees that fill up the government, or if it's career civil servants, what's the difference to me? Like, what could the natural conclusion of Trump's plan to enact Schedule F actually look like? Why is it important?
Yeah, it's vitally important because Donald Trump wants a government that is loyal to him, not loyal to the Constitution. He wants a government that serves him, not serves you, the American people. Donald Trump doesn't want equal justice under the law. He wants to dictate justice where there is no law. And so the way in which he wants to do that is by removing the people who administer justice evenly, who administer benefits regardless of whether you live in California or you live in Florida, who says that if you suffer a natural disaster and a fire in Los Angeles, you deserve the same equal dignity and treatment as if you live in Western North Carolina and suffer a flood, right? This will have real world consequences beyond what it means for people, migrants seeking immigration hearings, or even what it means for people working in agencies who want fair whistleblowers. It will affect each and every one of us. It may affect whether you get a building permit or a waiver, whether a corporation is given accelerated approvals or no approvals at all. Eventually, what Donald Trump wants is a government that he is able to dictate the winners and losers, not just on a mass scale, not just on an economy-wide scale, but on a person-by-person scale. You are favored and you get protection. You are disfavored. You get investigated and prosecuted. We are going to see political prosecutions. And the way that he's building up to that is by doing these small steps first to get everyone used to it, to get the legacy media compromised, which it already is, and bought in.
So again, everything that I had warned about during the campaign regarding Project 2025 is playing out right now. Our first move here is to contact our senators and tell them to vote no on Russ VA for OMB director. If you live in a state with a Republican senator, even better. The number is 202-224-3121. Again, that is 202-224-3121. Please take 5 minutes out of your day. They log the calls. And remember, this shouldn't be a partisan issue. We have a system of checks and balances for a reason. We do not live in a monarchy. You can like Donald Trump and still recognize the importance of a strong and healthy democracy where each branch of government serves as a check to the other. This isn't about left or right. This is about protecting our healthcare, protecting our children, protecting our vets, protecting the hungry. If that's what Republicans want to position themselves against, so be it. But we're not going to take it lying down. Before you go, just a quick note, if you'd like to see more of my content, which is always free of advertising, sponsorships, and paywalls, please make sure to subscribe to this channel using the subscribe button right here on the screen. And if you'd like to support my work even further, you can grab a copy of my instant #1 New York Times selling book, Shameless, available for sale right now. That link is also on the screen. Thanks so much for watching.